The opinions, viewpoints, and beliefs presented on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the management, the affiliates and broadcast partners, or the sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. Between science and ignorance, there is filler.
And good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Paranormal Filler. I'm your host, Wes Forsyth. You can find me on Twitter at ihuntghosts.com, although it's easier to search for Wes Forsyth. Paranormalfiller.com is my website. I actually went through this week and caught up on some of the stuff. I still got a couple of member things to put up, so if you paid for your subscription and you don't feel like you're getting your money's worth, you're not. But I am working on at least going through the motions. Very quickly, don't forget, Paranormal Filler is sponsored by Ken Boggle's House of Cards, tarotbyken.com. And another quick plug for myself. It's only a week away, people. Brian Cano at Bobby Mackey's Music World in Wilder, Kentucky. The Method at Bobby Mackey's. I'll be broadcasting live next weekend, so I have no idea what the show will be like as far as the live part of the show. I'll mix it up and tie it in a neat little bow for the affiliates. But next Sunday night, watch my Twitter feed. You'll find out when I'm on the air live, and I'll be doing some Periscope. I'm going to be trying to do some interviews with the people on the investigation that night. So keep that in mind. And a couple other dates to write in your book. September 10th, I'll be at the Farrar School with Coyote Chris Sutton. The Scarefest, September 29th through September 30th through October 2nd. I'll be there the 29th because that's when the party is, the launch party. And then in October, go ahead. Let me give you something to do on Halloween. The Bridal Cave. And no, I don't even have the address wrote down. But do have some events coming up with Cody. Chris Sutton will be doing some public ghost hunts. Looking forward to that. And I'll be getting the information posted just as soon as somebody gives me something official to post. My guest tonight is Paul Davids. He's written a book, excuse me, An Atheist in Heaven. He is co-author of that book. And we're going to be discussing what went on. It's basically, this is not fiction, people. This is the research and findings that went on after a good old-fashioned atheist passed away. So be with you in just a minute. And Paul, welcome to the show.
Hi, Wes. Thanks for having me.
It's a great pleasure. It's one. It never fails. When I actually get a book ahead of time and have time to read it, it's never anything that impresses me. The ones that I don't get time to read, such as this, sounds interesting as hell. Before we even get into what the book is about and everything, I try to go on Amazon and I looked at the reviews of it. That kind of gives me an idea of everyone of how the book is. The only negative reviews this book got were a couple of 3-star listings that basically still said it was damn well written, but they just didn't believe him. And then one guy just said he didn't like it. One bad review, so that's not too bad in today's internet age, Paul.
I guess not.
Let's get in.
The one that didn't believe it. First of all, I want to say An Atheist in Heaven is an absolutely true account of the paranormal, very, very strange things that began to happen after a very dear friend of mine died at age 92. He was the atheist. Forrest J. Ackerman. Maybe a lot of your listeners have heard of him because he was the editor for about 200 issues of Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine. He's deep into the world of sci-fi. He grew up with it, and he was the biggest promoter of sci-fi through the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s. Made a massive contribution to that field. Now, I have taken upon myself to document everything strange and inexplicable that happened after he passed away. I gave a sworn affidavit at the beginning of this book that it's an accurate account, that it's true, it's not invention, it's not exaggeration. And I even have an endorsement from the head of the Skeptic Society, Michael Shermer, who has written an inscription that's at the beginning of this book saying that he let me see if I can find the exact words, that he honors my my integrity and the honesty of my search. So that's from America's Chief Skeptic. So for the one who said, oh, he didn't believe the book on Amazon, sounded like he read the first 5 pages, where I conceded the fact that I am I'm an amateur magician, and my co-author made note of the fact I'm a member of the Magic Castle. So amateur magicians, they do, magic tricks and deception. But this book has absolutely nothing to do with that. This is the truth as I would tell it in court, the book An Atheist in Heaven.
Yeah, basically, that's what the 2 3-star ratings said. They said all of these people signed these affidavits saying what they were professing was absolutely true. The research was true. This is the findings we had. But basically, the premise was if anybody could fool them, it'd be a magician. So that's what we that's what they're. That's when you there's a line we draw on the paranormal field where you cross from skeptic to cynic. There comes a point where there are people that if something paranormal walked up and shook them, and kissed them on the mouth, it's still they would reach it. They would reach deep into their bag of psychology to find an alternative explanation. So yeah.
Well, one of the indications that the person that made that comment, I seriously doubt that he read the book, is he said that in the end, all we have to go on is one man's testimony and statements, which is absolutely not true. The physical evidence in this case led me to consult with scientists at 3 different universities. So we have input from one of the top forensic chemists in the country, that was chairman of the chemistry department of Indiana University. We have the research into the evidence, which had a chemical aspect of it, because a lot of it involved ink, from Dr. John Allison of the College of New Jersey, who, when he began studying the strangeness and the first incident in this case, weird stuff started happening to him too. And he reports on it in the book. He wrote 2 of the chapters. And then Dr. Gary Schwartz, my co-author, who has a PhD from Harvard, he taught at Yale, he's now a tenured professor of psychology and several other fields at the University of Arizona, Tucson. He has studied life after death evidence for over 15 years. He studied mediums, he has studied instrumental transcommunication, and he put all of his skills and all of his research to work on this case that I brought to him. Many other people were involved. There were mediums, many witnesses to the things that happened. So for a person, because anybody can write anything at Amazon, so for somebody to just say, oh, he's a magician, why should we believe his affidavit? We just have the word of one person. Clearly somebody that didn't read beyond page 5.
Now, okay, let's get into it. Okay, now Mr. Ackerman passed away in 2008. As you had pointed out, he was a devout atheist. Now, everybody, here's what you need to know in a nutshell. This was the guy that is credited with coining the phrase sci-fi. So that tells you what how big he was in the science fiction industry. And I was interested, and he was of course, also into horror. Did I read correctly that he created the character Vampirilla?
Yeah, he did.
Big graphic novel thing there.
Yeah, for Warren Publishing. He worked with Warren Publishing, which put out Famous Monsters.
Right.
And, to say he was big in the science fiction field is a huge understatement. Because when I was a kid, I'm a baby boomer. And, other baby boomers who went into the film business were very, very famous, including Mr. Spielberg and Mr. Lucas and Guillermo del Toro. And you have to count writer Stephen King and Peter Jackson. And two of the people that got to know, we call him Uncle Fari, Forrest J. Ackerman, Uncle Fari, from when they were kids. Rick Baker, he's won 10 Academy Awards for special makeup effects. And Dennis Murin, who was head of digital effects for Industrial Light and Magic, that's George Lucas's, George Lucas founded it. That's the company that did the effects for Indiana Jones and Star Wars, and is still doing most of the major effects films today. So all of them grew up under the influence of Uncle Fari, went into the business because he inspired them so much, including me, because, listen, I wrote 6 of the Star Wars sequel books for George Lucas. I was executive producer of Showtime's film Roswell, about the famous UFO crash. And I wrote for some of Fari's magazines, so I've been part of this my whole life. Many of the films that I've made are not science fiction because I'm interested in the arts. I am interested in religious mysteries and other subjects, but I have focused on science fiction. Fari was the inspiration, and Fari said, I am an atheist. I do not believe in God. I do not believe in the paranormal or ESP or life after death or ghosts or even flying saucers. To him, it was all fiction. Now, to a lot of his fans, it wasn't fiction. And in my case, as he was getting on in years, we had a conversation one time where I said, Fari, have you considered, about life after death? What if you're wrong? Are you sure you're right? And he said, listen, if I'm wrong and I wake up to some big sci-fi convention in the sky, he said, you can imagine I'll be very busy having a reunion with Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, and Peter Lorre, and all the horror actors I loved, and the producers, and my dear wife, Wendane. He said, but when the party dies down, if I have time, he said, maybe I would drop you a line. And then he winked and smiled and said, but don't count on it. He didn't believe it for a second, really. But after he died, and we had a huge tribute to him, it was undeniable the things that started to happen to a number of people, including, it began with 2 Canadian filmmakers that made a biographical film about him. And when it happened to me, it came with such shock when he dropped me that first line. Now, if you read An Atheist in Heaven or see the movie I made first, which is it's a 2 DVD set. It's called The Life After Death Project. Maybe some of you saw it on the Sci-Fi Channel, the first one. The sequel wasn't broadcast. But this started, I did this Life After Death Project because I had my video camera with me when we investigated the evidence. When I went to Indiana University and the College of New Jersey and and University of Arizona and worked with these scientists, I filmed it all and later spent 3 years putting the book together to be sure that I had everything down, including the scientific reports, because Wes, the ink thing that began it all, when he dropped me a line, that was just chapter 1 of this adventure, because there's been over 100 things that have happened since 2009 that I can't explain, that are very strange, like I've been living in the Twilight Zone. That's why there's this book.
Okay, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back with author Paul Davids The book is An Atheist in Heaven.
Hello, friends. Are you exhausted with life? Resent your children? Maybe your husband is cheating on you. Get yourself a tarot reading with Ken Boggle. He can provide you with the clarity, guidance, and answers you need. That's tarotbyken.com. He makes things seem less shitty.
And we're back with Paranormal Filler. Author Paul Davids, Atheist in Heaven. Okay, now, when, first, I actually find it interesting, as a side note, that someone that was so into horror and all the created stuff about the afterlife was an atheist. But that's just the way my small mind works. But I find it really interesting that the atheist is the one that comes forward to you and the other people. I cannot tell you how many times on Twitter or talking to some paranormal investigator, they say, well, don't worry, when I die, you all will have your definitive proof. And that never happens. And then here we go, some guy that didn't even believe in this stuff is doing it. So I just...
There's something you have to consider about Fari. Mm-hmm. That he was what you'd call a futurist. And for him, science fiction was the doorway to mankind's possible future. Of all of the things that technology would bring us, travel to other planets, maybe visits from space, maybe time travel, all of the things you could imagine. He saw it all as presenting the great possibilities for our future discoveries for science. So if anybody was going to herald the word when he passed away, if he could do it, this is my feeling anyway, Fari would be the one. He said he would, and he was an editor. He said, I'll drop you a line. And a line is exactly what he dropped me, because the first incident for me involved a document where a line was changed that logically couldn't be changed. I'll explain it. Mm-hmm. I knew that the document was ordinary. I'd printed it out. It was 24 pages, boring stuff. It was a calendar of my phone calls, business lunches, dinners. It was for tax purposes, going over the year 2008. And in March of 2009, I printed this out. And it's 24 pages. And an hour and a half later, I pick it up, I take it upstairs. I'm alone in the house. It's a vacation house we have in Santa Fe. I'm alone in that house. The doors are locked. And I had looked at the document before everything was normal. The ink was dry. Now, I was out of the room after I put it on the bed. I was out of the room for 5 minutes, alone in the house. And when I came back, I could see that one line in that document had been changed. It was blacked out, 4 words. You couldn't even tell it was 4 words because of the nature of the blackout, but it was still moist. Whatever ink or dye or solvent, whatever it was, paint that had created that, I didn't know at that time, was still wet. And it was neatly done, precisely, targeted. There was nothing accidental about it. In other words, when I first told this story to people who were close to me, first thing they'd say is, "Oh, come on, your printer fouled that up. You didn't notice it." And I said, no, because definitely an hour and a half went by since I printed it. I had looked at it, and when the document was changed, that line, it was moist. It was wet. The ink from an hour and a half ago wouldn't have been wet on the page. And then other people said, "Oh, well, do you have a leaky ceiling? Do you have any pets in the house? Did a pet urinate on it? Did you have a leaky pen in the bed?" It missed the point. Mm-hmm. that these words were precisely done. When I took it to Indiana University and took it to the head of the chemistry department, the first thing that he noticed about it was that this had been done deliberately, that it was precise, the words were targeted, and I didn't do it. That was the fundamental thing. It's the reason, that I swore this oath at the beginning of it. I had nothing to do with doing it. And science bore me out that after 3 years of study on this thing, which I interpret it as a message from Forrest J. Ackerman for definite reasons, the scientists involved tried to duplicate it, and they couldn't. They tried so hard. They spent 3 years on it. They assigned it as a class project to class after class after class. They supervised the students. They checked out 300 different solvents. They did everything they could to try to recreate what happened on the page. They couldn't do it. And it was a message. So this is why I say it's physical evidence. I do believe that Fari continues to exist with his quirky sense of humor. He loved wordplay and games on words. He was a mischief maker. And it's been proven to me again and again and again with witnesses for years now. So I have no other explanation for it. The head skeptic of America, Michael Shermer, has no explanation for any of it. And something very similar happened to him, by the way, since all this started happening to me. And one of the scientists who's been studying this, well, two of them, you could say, are now sort of haunted by this. And Dr. John Allison has had so much paranormal stuff. It all started happening to him the day I brought him the document to begin studying. And some of the stuff showed up on film. So what I'm saying, folks, is it's real. It's fully documented in the book An Atheist in Heaven. And it is visually documented in the documentary The Life After Death Project, which, as I said, I did first. So I've made it my job, my responsibility, to put it all down as it happened.
Now, I want to concentrate on this one incident, so that way we can fill the show out without giving them, and still give people a good reason to go on and read the book, including myself. But okay, on the ink. Okay, now when you found the printout, I'm going to say the casual person would have looked at that printout and said, "Well, crap! I didn't notice that before," and printed it out again and went on. What made you? First of all, did it occur to you that it was a message, that it could be paranormal? What made you take that next step to get it analyzed?
Well, I immediately felt that it could be paranormal because I was alone in the house and there was no one there who could have done it. So I felt like I was in the presence of a ghost, and I was scared. I was scared when it first happened. The
reason I asked that, I just want to interrupt you. I'm into the paranormal. I don't pretend to be a skeptic. I went off the deep end. But honestly, if that happened to me, I hate to admit it even to you and to my listeners, I'd have went, well, crap, and went on. So that's the reason I asked that the way I did. Okay, you can go on.
Well, there's several things that set the stage for it. I think that the fact that those two documentary filmmakers who made the film about Fari had a weird experience that they told me about, and were telling everybody about, the day of the big tribute for Fari. Big tribute, Egyptian theater, grand old theater in Hollywood. Every seat filled. Lots of major speakers, including Ray Bradbury, plus little old me. But anyway, those filmmakers had rapped on Fari's crypt that day and said, hi Fari, we're here, we came from Canada, we got the movie about you. They didn't consider it like a disrespectful thing that they were doing because they knew his sense of humor. Mm-hmm. They felt he'd laugh. Well, they were telling the story that weekend that within an hour they heard from him, and it was a very compelling story about what happened with their two computers One of them, the guy is blogging, and he gets a CAPTCHA code coming up, that you have to fill in those squiggly letters and numbers so they know you're not spamming. And the CAPTCHA code was for his name. It was Ackerman 000. And those CAPTCHA codes there were supposed to be random. They were just blown away when that happened. And that was part of it. There was also the voice that came out of the other computer when they began talking about it and said, is he really dead? The voice that said, oh my gosh, no way. And they discovered that voice, that's an animated emoticon. A little animated guy smiles and says, oh my gosh, no way, and rolls over. You can find that on YouTube. At least you could when it happened. But the other computer that spit those words out was asleep at the time, and it wasn't logged on to YouTube. So those guys had something uncanny happen to them. So it's in my mind.
Okay.
Maybe there may be something strange is going on here. And then there's another factor here. I've been in the field of UFOs since at least 1987, when I had a daylight sighting with my 2 young children. And that was what propelled me to make the movie Roswell for Showtime. Maybe a lot of your listeners may have seen it. It had major stars like Kyle MacLachlan, Twin Peaks, and it had Dwight Yoakam, the country singer, of course. It had Martin Sheen, Charlie's father. And we were telling the story of the UFO crash in New Mexico in 1947 as the witnesses told it, that it really happened. The deeper I got into that UFO research, the more impressed I was with how urgent it was to have physical evidence of these things, because it's what all of the skeptics cry out for. Give us something we can test in the laboratory. So my mind was set and focused from all of those things that when this happened, a chill went up my spine, and I felt immediately it was going to have to be looked at by scientists if I could find top scientists that were willing to examine it, and I did. Okay,
let's take it. I'm enjoying the hell out of this. I'm actually writing down questions, listeners, and I never do that. Okay, we're going to take another quick commercial break. We'll be right back with more from author Paul Davids.
Learn the method at Bobby Mackey's with Brian J. Cano. Sunday, July 24th. Learn investigating techniques, participate in experiments, and come experience Bobby Mackey's firsthand. Join Brian as he explores the infamous Bobby Mackey's music world for the first time. His method tour focuses on the process, philosophy, and execution of paranormal investigating and is suitable for novices and veterans alike. Brian's goal is to take each attendee and alter their perspectives with critical thinking, basic techniques, and logic. Event highlights will be broadcast live by me, Wes Forsyth of Paranormal Filler. Be interviewed about your experiences as they happen. For more information, go to neverstopsearching.com. That's The Method with Brian J. Cano, Sunday, July 24th.
And welcome back to Paranormal Filler. My guest is Paul Davids, co-author of An Atheist in Heaven. Now, from the chat room, they want to know, okay, we've established now that you were primed to at least look for something from your friend because other people had experience. So that solves that mystery for me. Now, they want to know in the chat room, how did you connect what happened on paper to Mr. Ackerman?
Well, that was a detective story that Sherlock Holmes would have admired, I think, because at first, when I reprinted the document to see what the words were, I wasn't impressed with what the words were. It didn't make any sense that anybody would highlight those words to me at first. The words, 2 of them you could still read, but 2 of them were completely opaque, completely blacked out. That was part of the big struggle that the chemists had when they began working on it, because 2 different levels of blackness. So the words that were blacked out, it was the man's name. It was spoke to Joe Amode, and what it meant, or Amode, what it meant was that on a certain date in the calendar, I had had a phone call with this man. I had proposed some business. It never happened. We weren't in touch again. So why spoke to Joe Amode? Well, Fari absolutely adored wordplay, and one of his favorite things was finding names within names and words within words. I've got dozens of examples of that from Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine. And just to draw home the point, his name was Ackerman. Some people called him Ack. It was one of his many nicknames. So if on the cover of Famous Monsters it's going to say, spectacular new movie, it doesn't say spectacular. It says spect, and then it says Ack, A-C-K, his name, and then it says Euler. So names within names is what he loved. When he wrote me an autograph in one of his magazines saying, "Hooray for Harryhausen." We all loved Ray Harryhausen, who made the Sinbad movies, and Jason and the Argonauts. Well, he didn't just write the word hooray. He would write who, and then a hyphen, and then Ray. Hooray for Harryhausen. Well, Ray is Harryhausen's name. So you get the point. He liked names within names. Now, the name of his caretaker for the last 10 years, who was closest to him, who took care of his every need, and who engineered his great tribute, his name is Joe Moe. Joe Moe. And Fari was always writing about Joe Moe. Well, Joe Moe is contained in Joe Amode. So a way to look at this, when he said spoke to Joe that it was spoke to Joe Moe. He's telling me he spoke to Joe Moe. Now, I hadn't figured that out yet when I called Joe Moe. I called Joe Moe to ask if he had any old documents of Fari writing for Famous Monsters where he crossed out words, first drafts. I wanted to see how he did it. Did he black out words completely, like in my document? Or did he just draw a pencil line through things? When I called Joe, he didn't even let me get out my question. He was so excited. This was a few days after the tribute. Well, actually, our conversation was probably about 10 days after, because the event to me with the ink happened about a week later. So I called Joe, and Joe said, "Paul, I got to tell you, I'm not an atheist like Fari, but I'm certainly an agnostic. I'm a skeptic. I don't, go for believing in these things. But after the tribute, one night I had an apparition. Fari came to me, and in his own mischievous way, he thanked me for the tribute. And he said it was super real. It was more real than reality itself. And then in an instant, he's gone, and my room is exactly the same as I saw it when he was there. But he's gone. Just a few little memorabilias of him scattered around the room, but no more Fari. But he said, "Paul, it was as if he came and spoke to me." And at that moment, I was so excited. That was the moment of revelation. I was so excited. Joe told me later, he said it was like you put your hand on a stove. Yeah, you sort of shrieked, because I realized that the message to me was, spoke to Joe Moe. It's like he thanked him for the tribute, and he's letting me know. That was no apparition for Joe. No, Paul, I spoke to Joe. If Joe's going to be a skeptic about it, tell him. I've written you. I spoke to him. That's what happened. Now, I couldn't prove that at first, and what I had to do was work with the chemists. I said to them, "Look, find some ordinary explanation for this, and put me out of my paranormal misery here. I don't want to believe in ghosts either." And they said, "No, we'll take care of it. This shouldn't be a hard problem." They expected to solve it in a day or two. They used all kinds of equipment, laser desorption in New Jersey, mass spectrometry. They couldn't solve it. They couldn't duplicate it, and they ended up being haunted. So, and of the following things that kept happening again and again and again, most of them had Fari written all over them, like the mask I have of his face that I bought at his estate auction. It was in his Grand Acker Mansion, his big museum of science fiction, for decades. Now it's in my house, and it had been in the same place for a couple of years after I got it. And the very day I got the phone call from the Sci-Fi Channel saying, we want your Life After Death Project movie. We're going to air it. That very day, while I was out of the room where I keep Fari's mask and no one else was in there, the mask moved 10 feet across the room. It's the only thing that moved. There's no open windows, no vents, nothing that could move it, and it's his face. So you see, many of the things that have happened are referential directly to Fari. And that's why I feel he's been in contact with me. We were friends for over 40 years, and he's showing me, it doesn't end. I'm still here. Same personality, same sense of fun. Friendship continues. When there's great loyalty between two people, friendship continues. That's it.
Now, just to clarify for my own sake of mind here, the chemist and scientist that looked at the blurred ink, are you saying that they could not even establish what the blur was, let alone how it happened? But it wasn't ink. It wasn't. Did they have any explanation?
Yeah, no. They found out a lot of information about them.
Okay,
it was very baffling information. So when they broke down the molecular structure, they found several things. One, there's the molecular structure of the actual ink that the printer spits out. Then they found silver, and then they found calcium chromate. They didn't know why those other chemicals would be there. Calcium chromate has to do with, it's been used for creating yellow in artists' pigments for many years ago. Isn't used anymore. And silver shows up in many old printing processes. Dr. Allison said when he analyzed a very old Quran, I think it was from the 15th century, the silver was there. Now here's the big puzzle they had with this thing. Two of the words were completely opaqued, but from the amount of ink that was there for those words, spoke to Joe Amadei. No matter what solvent they used, there is no way that they could make that ink that was there, those molecules, become dark enough to completely black out the names. That was the main scientific puzzle, in addition to the other elements that were there. They couldn't create opaqueness, and they tried hundreds of different devices to do it. And of course they didn't bother with trying dyes or paints because they knew that wasn't what it was. They could tell from the molecular structure. They needed to look for the actual molecular structure of that ink, but there was never enough of it on the page to create that effect. That was the conundrum. You understand?
Now I understand. It's I'm just absolutely fascinated. Now,
so the upshot of that is, because those were their findings and they couldn't reproduce it, it certainly got me off the hook of any suspicion. Because when you go to a scientist with a problem like this, something about paranormal, first of all, most of them won't touch it. But I found, two who did. But as they look at the problem, they have to consider maybe the person that brought it to them is having a fast one on them. Maybe I'm not telling the truth would be in their mind. They'd have to eliminate that. Well, they did eliminate that. I mean, John Ellison said you couldn't have done this if you wanted to, because I couldn't do it, he said, after 3 years of trying. So they know that I was telling the truth. I got the clean bill of health from them, and that my motivation here was completely pure, because anything otherwise would have been a dishonor to Fari Ackerman, a man I respected, who helped me in my career, who I admired and you could say loved for 40 years. To his dying day, he was 92, frail, terrible health, faded away at 2 minutes to midnight. And I'm the owner of a painting now that I acquired at the estate auction, a painting that was made 4 years before he died, that has a clock behind his face, portrait of him, clock, 2 minutes to midnight.
Wow.
The exact time he died 4 years later. Coincidence? That's one of hundreds of incredibly strong coincidences that are connected with this case.
Now, after this event happened to you, and of course you've alluded to other events that happened to you. Now, I understand that.
And I was not the only one by any means.
Well, that's where I was going.
Radio hosts. It's been happening to the radio hosts. It's been happening to people reading the book on their iPhone, the ebook version of it. And some people who didn't know me. For example, the last interview I gave, I think it was the last one, or one of the last couple. The lady interviewing me said that she had written a file with some notes of questions to ask me, but she got a power surge, and the power surge had blown out her printer. She said everything else in the house was working, the printer wasn't working, and she was frustrated she couldn't get the pages to print. She'd read my book, and she said, Fari, if this is you, she said, I'm not asking you to fix my printer, but could you just make it work long enough for me to print out those pages, so I can interview Paul? Well, then it did work. Only for those 3 pages. It printed those 3 pages, and then it stopped working again. And it wouldn't work the next day. So, Wes, you have things like that. Then you have things, I want to tell you 2 other kind of really weird examples happening to other people. One, there was the lady who is in Santa Fe, and she had heard me over a couple of years tell her the stories of the strange things happening. And we've had a lot of strange things. We've had apports, appearances, disappearances, electronic voice phenomena, instrumental transcommunication, incredible synchronicities, mediums bringing extraordinary information through that's accurate that they couldn't have known, all these things. So this lady, Bet, was reading the book, and she put it down. She's reading it on her iPhone. She went out on her patio, and she said, Fari, if all this stuff is really happening, she said, would you give me a sign? I really like it if you would give me a sign. She returned her iPhone. She said she picked it up, and she was in shock because the pages of the book suddenly started advancing by themselves. Flip, 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 one page after another, going maybe 50 pages ahead in the book, stopping on a page and highlighting 2 paragraphs in blue. And the 2 paragraphs were about the difficulty of communicating between the 2 worlds, the world we can't see and this physical world. So that happened to her. Then you have the case of author Robert Egby. He wrote a review of the movie, The Life After Death Project. And he showed it to his girlfriend. They watched it together. And when it was done, she turned on her cell phone, and she meant to check her emails, but she incorrectly pressed navigation. And a map came up on her screen. And it wasn't a map of where they physically were. It was a map of a location 10 miles away with the road Ackerman Street going right through the center of the screen. No explanation for these things, Wes.
Well, I probably won't have a good story to tell you after I've talked to you. And even if Mr. Ackerman, if you're listening, I'll give you the ground rules. I have animals in the house, so nothing you do that makes noise or if will. I mean, you would have to juggle dishes, Mr. Ackerman. And even then, I would probably sleep through it. The moving stuff will not help because I'm a borderline hoarder, so I don't know where anything in the house is anyway. Mm-hmm. And don't tear up any of my electronic stuff. I'm in a 100-year-old home. I praise God every day that I wake up and anything works the way it is. So, I mean, computers blow all the time, and so he'll have to use some imagination, is all I'm saying, to get any message across to me.
He has plenty of imagination. He's always surprising.
Now, okay, now, God, we're burning through the hour. I want to move on to the Laboratory for Advances in Consciousness and Health.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Okay. My co-author, Gary Schwartz, Dr. Gary Schwartz. I think I mentioned that he has a PhD from Harvard and he taught at Yale. He's now a tenured professor at University of Arizona, where he runs the Laboratory for Advances in Consciousness and Health. Now, as part of that, he's studying life after death, focusing on two different areas of research. The one area is what we call instrumental transcommunication.
Mm-hmm. Very familiar with at least what we do in the
that means the use of our electronic equipment to send a signal or a message through to us. And it could be a computer, it could be a video camera, a telephone, a tape recorder, but something, and electronic voice phenomena comes under that. But what Gary was doing is he created special software of a bar graph that moves along the screen in real time so that the tiny little sensors that he's got in the room, as they pick up some kind of an electromagnetic field or radiation that goes beyond the baseline. There's a baseline because there's always, some radiation, whether it's light or heat or gamma rays or whatever it is. There's a baseline always there. So he's looking for responses that transcend the baseline, and he likes to, if he can, define how much it should pass the baseline. For example, when he began trying to communicate with Fari Ackerman, he wanted Fari to produce a 3 on his screen. Imagine a bar graph, so it's a bar that goes up 3 lines. Or another way to get a 3 is a bar that goes up 1 line followed immediately by a bar that goes up 2 lines. And he found that he could communicate with Fari Ackerman. Well, he calls it hypothesized Forrest J. Ackerman, because you can't say 100% that's who you're communicating with. It's his hypothesis. Mm-hmm. That's the spirit. He has a group of spirits that he has been using these devices on. He even has the black box, which is a camera inside a black box, inside another black box, inside another black box. So you'd think no light could get through there. But an occasional photon of light, does get through. And he wants to measure it to see if, in attempts to communicate with spirit can create a bunch of photons hitting the lens of the camera in there. Mm-hmm. And creating something that you can actually see. He's gotten positive results on all of this. He's been published in peer-reviewed journals. Nevertheless, the skeptics of the country, I think without ever really addressing his work for what it is, as armchair critics, they just attempt to tear it apart.
Right.
But his work is sincere. It's well documented. He has a firm scientific background. So that's one of the things he does, is that Laboratory for Consciousness and Health Advances. The other thing is studying mediums. He's very fascinated by the idea of the psychic, who could communicate with the departed spirit. Now, he has spent years vetting them, meaning a lot of people think that they are psychic or they are a medium, and they're not really. They try, they convince themselves, Maybe they're fakes, maybe they're wannabes, but you have to eliminate those people.
I tend to think most of them are just not good at it, but go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nevertheless, he has found some who are superb at it, who are pretty mind-boggling at it. And we went to 2 of them, of his people. It was spread a year apart, actually. First, it was Catherine Yunt in Tucson, and we filmed her, and she didn't know who I was. She was not told my name. I was just the man with the camera. She agreed she could be filmed. And we just told her that I wanted to communicate with a deceased friend named Forrest. And then she began. And what unfolded in that hour was so accurate in so many ways that I was very, very impressed. I felt like surely something was coming through. Then a year later, an Israeli psychic comes to Tucson. Orit Ishyemini Tomer is her name. And Orit was fantastic. Again, she didn't know who I was. We filmed her. She got so many things through about Fari, including that he was an atheist, including that he made money from writing. She sent books, and then she mentioned a magazine, a funny little magazine. And she mentioned the fact that parents were kind of afraid of him when their children would start to be his fan. And that was true, because a lot of parents of my generation, they didn't like famous monsters. They didn't like horror movies. So if a teacher caught you with that magazine, you'd never see it again. So that was true. And she went through all of these different things about Fari, and then she said, I feel he collects these, she said, it's strange little dolls, and they're weird. Just like his sense of humor, it's a strange sense of humor. It's like many people might not find it funny. It's an unusual sense of humor, and these are unusual dolls. She didn't know the word for monster in English, but she did say they are sort of like, they remind me of Yoda. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, Fari, he had an 18-room mansion they called the Acker Mansion, absolutely filled with monsters from the movies. I mean, he had all the original props he could possibly acquire from all the classic movies. They were there in his house. And he had open house on Saturdays. Anybody could come and spend an hour seeing his collection. He was generous. He was a wonderful man in that sense. So the psychic Orit gets all of these things through. And this is part of what Gary does in his you asked about the Laboratory for Advances in Consciousness. No, that's it. He's my co-author on the book, because when I brought him the Fari case, things started happening to him too. Oh my God, there's such a list, and strange things, and then sometimes the same thing would happen to me right after it happened to him. So we've been living in a very real twilight zone.
If you're talking to Mr. Schwartz anytime soon and he wants to do some field work, tell him I can hook him up with Cooperative Ghost. I actually have a location where I swear the ghosts are trying to do the things that you're describing to me, and I'm not slick enough to pick up on it.
I will tell him.
I swear to God, this is serious. I'm not making a joke.
Now, is this in a graveyard or a house?
No, it's in an old movie theater. And to tell you how cooperative they are, we asked them to give us through a shack hack, basically, give us their names. Well, they gave us their names. Okay, well, there's some, skepticism to that. So I actually went back and said, okay, I want to hear you say your name again. So I thought, if I have 2 shack hack sessions that, give me the same information, that'll be good evidence. The little girl actually said her name on our camera. Plain as day. Even the skeptics say you either faked it or that's something talking into the camera.
What state is this?
Kentucky.
It's in Kentucky.
Yes, but I take people in there, and I mean it's we've done an ongoing study of the place. I finally just quit because I didn't feel like I was contributing anything new. But the literally I built up a I want to say a relationship, and it's like they want to be proven. That's how, you know, they want to interact. So I just wanted to throw that out there. The only other question I got for you, because we're at the top of the hour, in all these communications, in all these, because the one thing that always bugs me about talking to ghosts is I have never really gotten anything terribly, terribly useful from them. Has he ever passed on information about the afterlife that you would consider answering the great questions of life?
Well, I think first I want to say that in establishing for me that he's still here, that he's still aware of what I'm doing, and that he can comment on it through the things he does, through the changes he does through my computer, through the technological things he changed while I was making my film. He's showing me the awareness. He also, I felt an urgency to complete these projects through him. Like at a certain point, I'm doing it for him because he wanted this word out that he's still here. The other thing is that through Orit, the medium, when we asked her, after she said, you know, he's sort of an atheist when he was alive, and I said, well, what does he think now? And she said, now he says it's all so much bigger, so much more vast than he ever could have dreamed. And I think that's part of the message, too, that we live in a very small, limited part of reality with just 5 senses that are not good enough even to do what a lot of animals can do as far as sound and vision. So we're getting in our daily lives a very small picture of a very, very vast creation, and he's giving a sense that it is all very, very vast, and we just fit into it as a very small piece of the puzzle. That's what I. That was
actually the follow-up for the final question. I wanted to hear whether or not he was still an atheist, because in my mind, I can still wrap around. Because to me, atheist means you don't believe in a God. But I have a friend who's an atheist that believes in an afterlife, but still does not believe in a supreme being as such. And so that was my question: is whether or not
you can deal with those questions separately, and we do try to deal with them separately in the book, because in the book we're dealing with afterlife. We're not trying to establish that there is a God or answer that question. You know, Gary does that, I think, very well in some of his other books, particularly the Afterlife Experiments and the God Experiments. Mm-hmm. But I think that that everybody's got their own idea. I guess this word God, it means so many things, but just the point is, he's telling us that this world of life that expands beyond the physical body that we live in is more vast than we can ever dream. So there's a whole lot more to this picture, and a whole lot more for us after we leave our physical frame than we can imagine. And that's as much as I feel that I've been told.
Thank you, Paul. This has been one of the best shows I've done for a year. I have just enjoyed the hell out of this.
Thank you. And can I say again? I know we're at the end of time, but to see these projects that I've done, if you go to Amazon.com, it's the easiest way. The book An Atheist in Heaven, you can get it as a hardback or you can get it as an ebook. And then the Life After Death project, the movie, it is part of Amazon Prime. If you're part of that, you can just watch it, stream it. But the advantage in getting the 2 DVD set is that it's 2 DVDs. There's the sequel also. There's 40 minutes of important bonus features. So it's not expensive, and the DVD set is out there too. So that's what I bring. And look for my other movies, because you've got, I'll quickly rattle off. There's Roswell, Starry Night, Timothy Leary's Dead, The Artist and the Shaman, Before We Say Goodbye, The Sci-Fi Boys, about the history of science fiction effects with Peter Jackson, and focusing on Forrest J. Ackerman. That's one of them too. And then I have a new one coming out this year. It's not quite out yet. but it will be coming, and it's called Marilyn Monroe Declassified. And you'll get the whole story that you haven't been told about Marilyn Monroe and the suspicious circumstances of her death. So go to Amazon and also Internet Movie Database, imdb.com. My name is Paul Davids. That's David with an S. You can find all the different projects I've done there, including 79 episodes of the Transformers cartoons. I was production coordinator. So had a long career, very grateful for it, and I hope that your listeners will be curious enough to find out about some of these other things I've done.
Once again, thank you, everybody. This has been Paranormal Filler. My guest tonight has been Paul Davids. Check out Paranormal Filler next week, and definitely follow up on An Atheist in Heaven. You can also go to lifeafterdeathproject.com. Search on Amazon, as he said. Paul, thanks again.
I really appreciate the opportunity, Wes. Thank you.
And thank you for listening.
Paranormal Filler.